The celebration had been perfect, at least for a moment. The golden lights of the Forrester ballroom shimmered over crystal glasses, violins whispered through the air, and Hope Logan's laughter mingled with the soft hum of congratulations. It was supposed to be a night of redemption, of healing, a chance for the families of Forrester, Logan, and Spencer to prove that history did not always have to repeat itself. When Hope and Liam cut the wedding cake, Brooke stood near the edge of the crowd, smiling with that tender, maternal pride that had defined her for decades. She was radiant, almost too radiant, as if the years of pain had finally settled into something resembling peace. But peace in Los Angeles, especially under the roof of Forrester Creations, was always an illusion, one that shattered the moment the world dared to believe in it. As applause echoed across the room, Brooke's smile faltered. The edges of her vision blurred, the sound of laughter warped into a low hum. She clutched the table beside her, her fingers trembling. The wineglass slipped from her grasp and shattered at her feet, drawing gasps from nearby guests. Ridge was the first to reach her, his voice low and frantic, calling her name as her knees buckled. Brooke's world tilted, the chandelier lights fracturing into 1,000 brilliant pieces before darkness claimed her completely. The next scene unfolded in sterile light. The scent of antiseptic replaced that of roses and champagne. When Brooke's eyes fluttered open, the hospital's ceiling stretched above her like a blank canvas. A nurse was speaking softly, words she could barely hear. Ridge stood at the foot of the bed, his jaw clenched, his eyes shadowed by the kind of fear that comes from loving someone too long to bear losing them. "You fainted," he said quietly, though his tone held more accusation than concern. "The doctor's running some tests." It wasn't long before the door opened and a young physician entered, his face carefully composed. "Mrs. Forrester," he began, glancing at his clipboard, "you're perfectly fine, but there's something you should know." Brooke's heart stilled. The doctor hesitated, then smiled gently. "You're pregnant." For a moment, the words didn't register. She blinked, searching his expression for a hint of error. Pregnant. The word struck her like a physical blow. She was silent for too long, long enough for Ridge's face to drain of color. "That's impossible," she whispered finally. I'm too old. It can't be." But the doctor only shook his head. "It's early, but the test is conclusive." Ridge turned away, his shoulders rigid, as though the air itself had turned to stone. His silence was worse than any explosion. Brooke's mind reeled, a flood of memories racing through her. Late nights at the Spencer mansion, the sound of Bill's voice on the phone, the arguments that turned into something dangerously familiar. She had told herself it was closure, just two people confronting the wreckage of their past. But closure had always been her lie of choice. 2 days later, the truth detonated. Somewhere inside Spencer Publications, Bill sat behind his massive glass desk, staring at an envelope that bore the logo of the same private laboratory he had used for decades to keep his secrets quiet. When he tore it open, his hands did not shake. He read the words once, twice, then leaned back in his chair, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. Well, he murmured, the edges of his voice laced with both awe and danger. "I didn't see that coming." He didn't need to say it aloud. The test results said everything. Paternity confirmed. William Spencer, biological father. By the time the news reached the Forresters, the house had already turned into a battlefield. Ridge confronted Brooke in their living room, the same room that had witnessed their love, their vows, and their countless implosions. His fury was cold, controlled at first, the kind that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "Tell me it isn't true," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Tell me you didn't do this." Not again. Brooke couldn't speak. Her silence was its own confession. Ridge's composure shattered. "You swore to me," he roared, pacing across the floor like a caged animal. "You swore after everything we've been through that I was the only one, that you were done with him. And now you're carrying his child." His voice cracked on the last word. Tears burned Brooke's eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen, Ridge." "I didn't mean," he turned on her, eyes blazing. You didn't mean to? You never mean to, Brooke. But it always happens, doesn't it? Bill, Deacon, every man who tells you what you want to hear, you let them in. And every time, you destroy everything we've built. The door burst open before she could respond. Katie stood there, her face pale, her eyes filled with disbelief. Behind her, Bill lingered in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the silence in the room was suffocating. Then Katie moved, crossing the space in 2 furious strides. The sound of her hand striking Brooke's face echoed like a gunshot. "How could you?" she spat, her voice shaking. "How could you do this to me again? To all of us?" Brooke didn't raise a hand in defense. She stood frozen, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Katie, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "Don't," Katie hissed. "Don't you dare say you didn't mean to. You knew exactly what you were doing. You always do. You've taken everything from me. Every man I've ever loved, every piece of peace I've ever found, you've turned into dust." Bill stepped forward then, his tone low, dangerous. "That's enough, Katie." She turned on him, her eyes burning. "Don't you dare defend her. You did this too." Bill met her gaze, but there was something unsettling in his calm. "It happened, yes," he said. "But don't turn this into something it isn't. Brooke didn't plan this. Neither did I." Ridge laughed bitterly from across the room. "Oh, spare us your moral poetry, Bill. You've wanted this for years, to prove you could take her from me again. Well, congratulations. You've won." Bill's composure faltered for the first time. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said quietly, though even he didn't seem to believe it. "But if there's a child, there is no if," Ridge snapped. "And that child is the end of us." Brooke collapsed into a chair, trembling. The room spun with the weight of too many years, too many betrayals. The men who had defined her life now stood on opposite sides of her, both claiming her, both condemning her. Katie, the sister she had loved more than anyone, stared at her as though she were a stranger. That night, the storm outside the mansion mirrored the chaos within. Brooke sat alone by the window, one hand resting on her stomach. The realization that she was carrying Bill's child settled over her like a shadow she could neither escape nor fully comprehend. It wasn't just scandal, it was a reckoning. Ridge had left hours earlier, slamming the door behind him, his parting words still ringing in her ears. "You've destroyed everything we had left, Brooke. Don't come looking for me this time. I'm done." Across town, at Spencer Publications, Bill stood in his office, staring at the city lights. He felt both powerful and hollow, like a man who had finally won a war only to realize there were no survivors. He poured himself a drink, but it did nothing to steady him. Every victory in his life had come with collateral damage, but this felt different. This was family. This was blood. When Katie entered without knocking, her presence carried the quiet fury of someone who had cried all she could. "You've done it again," she said. "You've ruined us." Bill turned to face her. "I didn't plan this, Katie. But you didn't stop it either," she said coldly. "You never do. You chase what you want until it's yours, and when it destroys everyone else, you just shrug and call it fate." He didn't answer. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't make it worse. Katie moved closer, her voice breaking. "Do you love her?" Bill's eyes softened. "I'll always care about Brooke. You know that." "That's not what I ask." He hesitated. "It's complicated." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "It always is with you, isn't it?" Back at the hospital, Brooke returned for further testing, her mind a whirlwind of doubt. Alone in the waiting room, she remembered every time she had promised herself to choose differently, to be better. Yet somehow, she always ended up here, caught between love and destruction, passion and regret. When the nurse handed her the final confirmation papers, she didn't even open them. The truth was already a living thing inside her, undeniable and relentless. Days turned into weeks, and the story spread through Los Angeles like wildfire. The tabloids called it the Logan Scandal Reborn. Ridge withdrew entirely, immersing himself in work, his pride too wounded to confront her again. Bill tried to reach Brooke several times, but she refused his calls. Katie avoided them both, her silence a wound deeper than anger. When Brooke finally agreed to see Bill, it was late evening at her home. She looked fragile, exhausted. "I don't want your help," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but you're going to need it." She shook her head. "What I need is for this not to have happened." Bill's gaze drifted to her stomach. "We can't change that, but we can decide what comes next." Her eyes filled with tears. "What comes next? You think we can just build a life out of this? After everything we've done to everyone else?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I care about you and our child." Those words, "our child," hit her with both comfort and terror. She had spent her life being the woman who followed her heart, and every time it had led her into ruin. But as she looked at him, something inside her cracked. Maybe this was her last chance at redemption, or her final undoing. The following morning, Ridge appeared at her door unannounced. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn. "I came to say goodbye," he said simply. "Not just to you, to all of it. I can't do this anymore." Brooke's voice trembled. "I'm sorry." "I know," he said. "You always are." He turned to leave, then paused. "You'll make a good mother again. Just try not to destroy this one too." When he was gone, she broke completely. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over Los Angeles, cold and distant. Brooke sat by the window, her hand pressed to her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter of life within her. Somewhere out there, Ridge was rebuilding his world without her. Katie was nursing her wounds in silence. Bill was plotting how to turn chaos into order, as he always did. And in the quiet space between all of them, Brooke realized something painful and inevitable. The life inside her was both punishment and possibility, a mirror of every choice she had ever made. The city woke slowly beneath her, glittering and cruel, and Brooke Logan Forrester whispered into the dawn, "This time, I'll do it differently." But even she didn't know whether it was a promise or another lie dressed as hope. The morning after Ridge's departure felt like the longest of Brooke's life. The silence in her house was suffocating, an unnatural quiet that seemed to amplify every heartbeat, every regret. The sunlight filtering through the curtains felt too bright, as if mocking her, casting golden light on a world that had already judged her. For years, Brooke Logan Forrester had lived under the gaze of the town's whispers, surviving scandal after scandal, heartbreak after heartbreak. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't sure she had the strength to rebuild. She spent the early hours pacing the living room, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other gripping a cup of tea gone cold. The sound of the clock ticking grew unbearable, each second a reminder that time moved on even when everything else stood still. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Ridge was beginning a new day without her. Somewhere, Katie was trying to make sense of betrayal, and Bill was waiting, always waiting, believing he could turn disaster into opportunity. When her phone finally rang, Brooke hesitated before answering. It was her daughter, Hope. "Mom, are you okay?" came the soft, worried voice.
"I'm fine," Brooke lied.
But Hope had inherited her mother's intuition. "No, you're not. I heard about the hospital. And I heard about the baby." The pause that followed was thick with emotion neither of them could put into words. Hope's voice trembled. "Is it true? Is it Bill's?" Brooke closed her eyes, her throat tightening. "Yes," she whispered. Hope's breath caught. "Mom," she didn't sound angry, just broken, the way a child sounds when the parent she's always idolized suddenly seems human. "You can't undo this, can you?" "No," Brooke said softly. "No, I can't." When Hope hung up, Brooke sat alone again, her reflection in the window almost unrecognizable. The woman staring back at her looked older, tired, haunted by choices that refused to stay buried. Across the city, Bill Spencer was not sleeping either. He stood on his penthouse balcony, watching the early morning haze lift from the skyline. The city was waking up, unaware that one of its most powerful families was crumbling. He had thought victory would feel different. He had imagined that knowing Brooke carried his child would fill him with triumph, with a sense of destiny fulfilled. Instead, all he felt was a hollow ache, a reminder that power meant nothing when it came wrapped in pain. Katie hadn't spoken to him since the confrontation. She had moved out of his mansion without a word, leaving behind only her wedding band and a note that read, "I can't do this again." He had reread it 100 times, unable to tear it apart, unable to let it go. At the office, Liam noticed the change immediately. His father's usual bravado was gone, replaced by something quieter, heavier. "You okay, Dad?" he asked. Bill gave a short laugh. "Do I look okay?" Liam hesitated. "I heard about Brooke." Bill's expression darkened. "Everyone has, apparently." He turned toward the window, gripping the railing. "It's funny, isn't it? I built empires, crushed competitors, survived scandals, and yet I can't survive my own heart." Liam wanted to comfort him, but there were no words that could touch the kind of mess his father had made. He knew the pattern too well. Bill destroyed everything he loved and then convinced himself he could fix it. Meanwhile, Ridge retreated to the Forrester mansion, where Eric found him sitting alone in the design room, surrounded by sketches that suddenly meant nothing. "I heard," Eric said quietly, "about Brooke." Ridge didn't respond. He simply stared at the papers in front of him, his hands trembling slightly. "She was my life, Dad. Every time she broke me, I swore I'd never go back. And every time I did. Because somehow, I believed she'd change. I believed we'd change." Eric sighed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Love doesn't always make sense, Ridge. But it's never simple. Brooke isn't evil. She's human, and humans make mistakes, especially the ones who feel too deeply." Ridge looked up, his voice raw. "But when does it stop? When does she stop hurting everyone around her?" Eric didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew that Brooke's capacity for love was both her gift and her curse. At that same moment, Katie sat in her sister Donna's living room, her hands gripping a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Donna tried to offer comfort, but Katie's pain was beyond words. "She did it again," Katie whispered. "I forgave her for Bill. I told myself that was the past. I believed her when she said she'd changed. And now her voice broke. Now she's carrying his child." Donna wiped her own tears. "Brooke never meant to hurt you, Katie. She just can't help herself." Katie finished bitterly. "I know. That's what everyone says. But how many times can one person destroy a family before I didn't mean to stops being an excuse?" Back at Brooke's house, the doorbell rang. When she opened it, Bill was standing there. He looked tired, older somehow, but his eyes still burned with that same impossible intensity. "Bill, I can't. Just listen," he said. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Reluctantly, she stepped aside. He walked in, glancing around as if the air itself were fragile. "I know you hate me right now. Maybe you should. But this, what's happening? It doesn't have to be the end." Brooke's laugh was sharp and hollow. "The end? Bill, this is the end. Of my marriage. Of my family. Of everything I've tried to rebuild." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "It could also be a beginning." "Don't," she said, shaking her head. "Don't you dare turn this into some kind of romantic fantasy. A child doesn't erase what we've done." Bill looked at her with something almost like desperation. "I'm not trying to erase it. I'm trying to take responsibility for it. For you. For this baby. I want to be there for both of you." Brooke's eyes filled with tears. "And what about Katie? What about Ridge?" "I can't undo their pain," he said quietly. "But I can promise you this, I won't walk away this time." The words hit her like a wave. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to scream. She turned away, pressing a hand to her stomach again. "You always say that," she whispered. "And then you do." Bill stood there, helpless, watching the woman he loved unravel under the weight of their choices. When he finally left, the house felt emptier than before. Days turned into weeks. Brooke avoided public appearances, retreating into solitude. Rumors swirled, tabloids speculated, and the name Logan once again dominated every headline in Los Angeles. Ridge poured himself into work, but even the Forrester team noticed his volatility. Katie, meanwhile, began seeing a therapist, determined to break the cycle of pain she had allowed to define her. But the one most affected was the unborn child, an unspoken symbol of the tangled history between two powerful families. One afternoon, Brooke attended her first prenatal appointment alone. As she listened to the faint rhythmic sound of her baby's heartbeat, tears streamed down her face. It was the first pure thing in her life in months, untainted, innocent, unaware of the chaos that awaited outside. For the first time, she felt something other than shame. She felt purpose. Later that week, Hope came to visit. She sat beside her mother, her expression soft. "You're not alone, Mom," she said. "No matter what anyone says." Brooke smiled weakly. "I wish that were true." "It is," Hope said firmly. "Because this baby, it's not a mistake. It's a life. And maybe it's what you need to finally start over." Her words planted a seed of strength in Brooke's heart. For the first time, Brooke stopped thinking of the baby as a punishment and began to see it as a second chance, one not defined by Ridge, or Bill, or the opinions of others, but by her own ability to rise again. Still, destiny in this world was never kind for long. A few nights later, Ridge showed up at her door once more, rain pouring down his shoulders. His eyes were softer this time, but the pain was still there. "I shouldn't have come," he said. "But I needed to see you." Brooke's breath caught. "Why?" "Because I hate that I still love you," he said quietly. "Even after everything." Her tears fell freely. "Then why can't we find a way to stop hurting each other?" He took a step closer, then another, until they stood inches apart. The thunder rolled outside, mirroring the storm within them. "Because," he whispered, "we don't know how to exist without the pain." When he left, Brooke stood by the window again, watching the rain streak down the glass. The city lights blurred in her vision, glowing like distant stars. She pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered, "You deserve better than this world we've made. But I'll fight for you. I promise." And somewhere, as dawn began to break over Los Angeles, a new chapter was quietly beginning, one where love, guilt, and redemption would once again collide, and where the baby growing inside Brooke would change every life it touched. Because in the bold and the beautiful, even the smallest heartbeat can shake an empire built on passion and pride.